In my opinion, if the only reason you're investing in a football club in the world is just to make money and you don't really care about sports.
When did you realize that football ownership was an investable asset class? And was there a specific transaction that really changed your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Meet Raphael Gellar, co-founder and executive director at Forward Sports Group. He has spent years as a freelance journalist for the BBC, New York Times and Washington Post covering football finance and Middle East politics. He's now one of the leading advisors on lower division club investment across Europe and the US.
A lot of investors, in the United States now, the major sports are valued at a minimum $1 billion. And if you can get $1 billion right now for one of the big clubs, then you're a very good negotiator, because the lowest deals I've seen are like 1.4, 1.5 billion. Football is just going to get more and more commercial, and we'll have to live with that and see the consequences.
What do you think is the biggest mistake that investors still make looking at football?
The biggest thing is successful businessmen think
Raphael, thank you very much for joining me today on this latest edition of the Berkida Podcast. Raphael is founder and managing director of Forward Sports Group, and we're delighted to have him today to discuss, his career about advising, investing, and operating in the world of football, particularly in lower division football, as well as he started a very successful football agency. But what is I think particularly interesting about Raphael's career is the fact that he came to this from a bit of a different background. And so perhaps Raphael, without further ado, would you mind, giving us a little bit of an introduction about how you got into the world of football in the first instance and what attracted you about it?
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's great to be on with you today. Yeah, my journey is a little different than other people's into the football finance world. I started out as a journalist, kind of covering sports and politics in the Middle East, and through the years started working with larger media outlets, freelancing, helping people whenever they needed help on things related to the Middle East conflict, Israel, Palestine, Turkey, Cyprus, etc. I've always been very into politics. My father is a professor of African politics, so politics has always been a huge passion of mine, and so is sport. And slowly worked my way through the journalism world, got to freelance for some of my favorite media outlets growing up, the New York Times, BBC for many, many years. I did a piece for Washington Post on ultra group in Israeli football. So got to do that for a really long period. And then about 8 years ago, kind of got advice from one of my mentors that if I had a chance to leave the journalism world at a young age to try and do it. And I did, and founded Forward Sports Group with a partner back in 2019, which seems like it was just a couple days ago, but now we've gone 7 years. And yeah, now in the football world, football finance, football business, football, everything you want to say, kind of world.
Unbelievable, great. Well, I mean, that's very inspiring, I think, for a lot of people that always ask, how do you get into the world of football? And I think, your example is quite besides being an inspiring one, is also a, interesting one, but let me say, it kind of confirms the fact that it's still an industry that requires professionalization, and therefore, you need professionalism to come from other industries. So definitely not surprising, let me even say. But let me ask you, I mean, how did journalists shape your understanding of football? And how, obviously you said you were freelancing with a very top quality, publication, right? Whether the BBC, whether the New York Times, so how did you use that experience and how did you apply that to the world of football?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, as a journalist, I was always kind of interested in more than the score. I never really enjoyed when I had to do match reports or things like that. I like to look at the whole picture, whether it's the political angle, the financial angle. And with some of my really good producers and editors, I got the opportunity to dig in to long piece journalism and write about, like I said, how a club is shaped politically, culturally, historically. Every time I got assigned to go cover a match, I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy going to a football match and saying this player was good, that player was good. For me, it wasn't about that. It was about understanding everything about the country, the culture, the history, the finances. I've always been very interested in if a football club makes this much, how do they spend? Where do they get the money from? And this is something that not a lot of people were talking about 10, 12 years ago. I mean, it's funny to say, but I was very active on Twitter in the 2012 to 2016 era. And then I haven't been nearly as active the last 8 years, but it was a different time then. It was, things were very different. It's not like kind of the way it is now. And I really enjoyed getting to know different football leagues all across Europe, all across the world, including North America, which I think we'll get into later, and understanding the models of these leagues, how clubs run themselves, where they get money from, where they don't get money from. And I was really lucky to, like I said, just that I got to work with some really good people in journalism that were interested in that. Unfortunately, I think as time has gone by, long written journalism, long piece sports journalism, it's not what sells. It's not what people buy. You know, Fabrizio is the most popular football journalist in the world. I wish him well, but he's not the type of journalist I wanted to be. He's a scooper and he does a great job. But it's just a different world now of journalism. And I think I made the right decision that I didn't stick in that world. There's still great journalists out there. Don't get me wrong. Some fantastic ones. I just think the world and how the world is shaped, it's much harder for those journalists to be heard. Maybe it's the right way to put it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that perspective, and I appreciate that in the world of content creation, it's quite different sometimes the way you want to position yourself, and I think there are some pros and cons, absolutely. But coming back to football, when did you realize that football ownership was an investable asset class, and was there a specific transaction that really changed your perspective, perhaps that you covered as a journalist, or that you came about?
Again, what I kind of advise the clients I work with is why you're trying to do this.
Mhm.
Sometimes an investment in football might even not have to do with the investment itself, of the football investment. I mean, in different countries in the world, people sometimes invest to get their name in the media. Through that, their business grows, their core business, not the football business. In some places, it's about real estate. In other markets, it's about giving back to your community. I think it's important for an investor to identify and qualify, why is he doing this? And my philosophy, which is not like many's, is you shouldn't just go into football investment if you're just trying to make money. We live in a world now where there's so many opportunities to invest in things. And in my opinion, if the only reason you're investing in a football club in the world is just to make money and you don't really care about sports, I'm not probably the right person to help you. I have great colleagues who would be able to help you, but
Mhm.
I think for me, I'm more of a romantic. I believe that, football investment, you become the custodian of the club. You have a responsibility. And if you come in with that kind of mentality of I'm only doing this to make money, also historically, it doesn't, most of the time, it doesn't succeed. There has to be a balance. And so I think for me, it was understanding, how do you find an investor who you can connect him with something that makes sense? Now, all the people I've ever advised, we've been very clear about how they could make money. We've told them
Mhm.
this is the path, but we've never said to them, only do this if you're trying to make money. And that's my philosophy. Lots of people disagree, lots of people agree, but that I don't think my philosophy will change
Yeah.
in the near future.
That's quite a good philosophy, I think, for the people that want to work with you, and particularly for the fans of the club you get involved with. Because for sure, I think you're raising a good point. And I want to come back to this, and maybe some of the opportunities in particular that you have experienced. But before we go there, perhaps just a step back. We were talking about your career as a journalist, and now in 2019 you launched Forward Sports Group. Can we say a bit more about Forward Sports Group? What gap do you see in the market? What is your typical client today? I understand, besides working and operating in the, let's say, football finance world,
Yeah.
there is another big activity, right? The Forward Sports Group does.
In 2014, I was in New York City for BBC doing a story on the New York Cosmos. And I always was like, America's the only country in the world that really doesn't have promotion relegation, doesn't have, relationships really of the leagues together, whether it's NASL or USL or MLS. There's always, in America, they call it soccer wars with the Z at the end of war. And it's always a battle. And I was very fascinated by that. And then The NASL collapsed, and we won't get into that in this podcast, but the NASL collapsed, and a new kind of USL that was around for a long time kind of took the spot as a secondary league in America. And at the time, I was doing a lot of intermediary work across the world for players. And I said, how many people in the world have the opportunity to start a football agency in a league that's basically just been created in the biggest economy in the world? You go to Germany, you go to any country in Europe, you can't just say, oh, I want to become a Bundesliga agent. There's thousands and thousands of people that have been doing that for 20, 30 years, and you have to get in line. So decided to form a USL agency that would work on everything related to players, helping clubs become football professional clubs, expansion clubs, and built that up. You know, we're one of the leading agencies now. I don't work in that world. I have a partner in the States. He's in New York. That's his day to day. But it has been fascinating following the growth of a soccer league in the United States from day one. And not many people or, you know, people in football can say that they've been a part of being with an agency from the moment the league kind of was founded, even though, again, old school USL people would say USL was founded before. I'd make the argument that it emerged as the second biggest league in America around 2018, 2019 when we started Forward Sports Group. So that's been a really fascinating thing to follow US football besides the MLS, because, you know, 350 million people, tons of football clubs in massive cities in America that are not MLS. I mean, people are always surprised to hear that there's clubs in the eighth biggest city or ninth biggest city in America that aren't MLS clubs or USL clubs, because America has 50 cities that are considered massive cities to the rest of the world relative to 500,000 plus metro. So yeah, that's been something very interesting and exciting to be able to do it. The agency is still running and still working with clubs, and there's always something new going on in the US soccer world, football world.
And it's obviously, you know, a space that is still growing very fast, but from, you know, let me say, you know, there is also increasing appetite, I think, from investors in the USA, right? I mean, that's something that I'm sure you have seen. What are the economics, perhaps, you know, of USA relative to European football? Can you give us a flavor, you know, based on your experience?
USL or USA?
USL.
USL. USL, you know, and be careful about all the things I say. I love the USL. I love the people there. I think everyone's doing a great job, but the revenue models are very different than Europe.
Yeah.
You know, the TV money, it's a completely different model, and it's many, many years behind. I mean, excuse me, if you were to look at a lot of clubs P&L, you notice there's no transfer fees. They have never sold a player. Or maybe, excuse me again, maybe they sold a player for a very minimal amount. The clubs are still figuring out a process of developing players, getting players from your academy to the first team, selling players. So you don't really have transfer fees. That's one. Two, TV money is basically almost non-existent, which is such a massive thing for many leagues in the world. And three, and this is the biggest one, is competition. You as an organization are battling with so many sports, so many different things. You know, in most places in the world, football is number one. If it's number two, it's kind of, you know, barely number two. In America, on a Saturday at 1 p.m., at 8 p.m., in all the cities where the USL plays, you know, it depends on the time of the year, but you could have college football. You could have NFL. You could have the end of the NBA season. You could have, you know, all the minor league sports that are coming up in America that everyone's getting into, pickleball and volleyball, and the competition level is enormous. If you're in the UK and you own a football club in a town, I'm going to give random examples: Truro, which is in Cornwall, or Lincoln in Lincolnshire, or Sheffield, or football is the one and only religion. Maybe some of those towns have rugby, and you know, maybe cricket, but football is number one, and everything is under. In America, as much as football is growing, and it is growing, there's a lot of competition, and that competition is about, you know, getting people in the stadium. Match day revenue is massive in the USL. Sponsorship, that's how you can make money. Without that, merchandise, Americans love buying jerseys and cool kits and this and that.
Yes.
A lot of USL clubs have done a really good job of promoting their kit and getting, you know, celebrities to wear it. And So it's a different model. It's very behind the rest of Europe. I always say to people with respect to Latvia, what I'm about to say, but if a club in the second tier of Latvia can go to Africa, sign a player, pay the African Academy $50,000, bring the player to Latvia, give him a stage, and then sell him for $500,000, why can't America do that? Every game's on TV, all data is available. It's just an old school of thinking. It's getting there. There's some great clubs who've done an amazing job on trying to sell players and develop players, but it's a mentality thing. It hasn't reached the level there, and it's still very new. I mean, we're talking about a league that's less than 10 years old, and we're talking about a league that's trying to figure out how to grow at a time when everyone in the world is talking about MLS, you know, Messi, but there's 40 plus professional clubs right now in the USL, in big markets, very big markets, some of them. And yeah, it's a very interesting thing going on in the background.
Do you think there's been possibly spillover effects from all the focus on the MLS, or do you think that the USL hasn't been able to catch that wind that is kind of still trying to reestablish themselves as a really separate opportunity?
I think USL is trying to figure out what to do that can make them different, special, unique. And the biggest thing they decided is 2028 to go to promotion relegation. And this is the creme de la creme. This is what it's all about. Because if you're watching a football match in America in September, right now, and your team's not making the playoffs, they're mathematically eliminated, they're not getting relegated, they're not making the playoffs, and you have an option to go see a baseball game, a volleyball game, unless you are devoutly passionate for the club, which I'm going to say again respectfully, if the club was founded 2 years ago, you're not going to be a diehard, this is all I care about, which is the feeling in Europe. It's difficult to expect a fan on a Saturday night to not do something else. But if your team could get relegated and go to a different league and get less money, and you have to sell players, and well, wait a minute, that bottom game that I wouldn't go to is more exciting. So USL is trying to do that. Hats off to them. They've hired some people from England, from the Premier League. They're adding a USL Premier division. So it's meant to be Premier, Championship, League One, League Two. Right now, the Championship is the highest tier of USL. It's the second tier. League One is the third tier, and it's professional. And then League Two is a summer league. It's the fourth tier. It's only 2 months, and players don't get paid. So that's very exciting. At our company at Forward Sports, we're very excited for that because it just will change everything. But I will say, it's still very unclear financially if a team gets promoted from this league to that league. We all just watched, what people call the most expensive football match in the world, the championship playoff final.
Nice.
You get 200 million guaranteed, even if you get relegated with parachute payments. What will happen if a team gets promoted in USL? Is the TV money going to be bigger because you're going to have a bigger sponsor? These are all things they're figuring out. It's not my job; it's their job. But it's very exciting because America needs promotion and relegation. And I'm not a hater on the MLS. They have a good role to play. They're developing good talent. They're selling players. They're getting Europeans that 5 years ago would have never come to MLS. Now they're coming. But football is promotion relegation. That's what it's all about. The pain of getting relegated, the joy of getting promoted. And I'm very excited for that to come to the United States, hopefully in 2028.
Look, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's obviously the drama, the tears, the passion, the celebrations you see. And, in my experience, I've been able to experience 3 promotions so far, with clubs I was involved with. And to be fair, the joy that you see, it's unbelievable. But of course, the quid pro quo is that you also experience extreme sadness and extreme discomfort and extreme, unhappiness when you get relegated. But I mean, I think this is a great, intro to the next question I was going to ask you, which is, something that we've also discussed a fair amount during, our in our Berkida brief, right? Which is, the fact that there's a lot of investor focus at the moment into second division, or anyways, maybe even third division clubs, right? First of all, this is something you got a lot of experience on, but before we go into some specific examples, what do you think is driving that interest? And do you think that people that are, investing in second division clubs need to look at the investment and the rationale differently, because at the end of the day, yes, you can get promoted, but that's kind of a one eggs into one basket type of investment, right? So what is your view about, this focus of investors on lower tier clubs investment?
I think, look, a lot of investors, in the United States now, the major sports are valued at a minimum $1 billion. And if you can get $1 billion right now for one of the big clubs, then you're a very good negotiator, because the lowest deals I've seen are like 1.4, 1.5 billion. So let's say you're an investor and you have $50 million you want to spend. What can you do with that now in the United States in the major leagues? You can't do really anything. You become a very, very small minority owner. You can become a partner, they would say, at an MLS team, or you can do USL, and some people do with that kind of money.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can say, wait a minute, I can buy a club in Europe with a 15,000 seat stadium that I can own and a 150-year history. And sure, maybe it's in the fourth tier, maybe it's in the third tier, maybe it's in the second tier, but the potential, the entry price is nothing compared, USL and some of these other leagues, and WSL, I'm sure the audience has seen the expansion fees are $150 million. In USL, I won't get into the numbers, but it's millions of dollars. So, that's building something from scratch. Some investors want to go to a club with a 150-year history. And, that's kind of a niche that I've been very passionate about, and that we've been able to do at Forward Sports Group is, there's lots of fantastic banks in the world that are working on the big deals that you read about online. Man United, that was for years linked with so many different people, and Chelsea that ended up getting done. And those banks are very important, but there's also a space of deals that are around 1 to 50 million euro. And that's where people like me in my industry come in to try and get those deals done, because they're not as focused as, the big banks aren't as focused on them as they are in bigger deals. And there's a space for people, advisors and consultants, to come in and try and explain to someone why a deal in the third tier of England could make sense, the second tier of Denmark. Yeah, I think, those deals, the entry price is relatively cheap, and you have to be very clear about what your vision is, why you're doing it, and what your end goal is, what you want out of it, 3 or 4 years later, when you look back, what will make you happy. And so that's what we try and do and help people with. And yeah, we've been able to work with some really good clubs and some really good people, and continuing to, as still very active, still working, always looking for the right people, very specific on the deals we work on, because we want them to have we want them to have yeah, meaning maybe is the best word. It's not just about picking up a paycheck. Forward Sports Group, it's connecting people together.
So look, if I'm not mistaken, you also had big experience in England, right? In particular with Lincoln City. Do you want to share some of your experiences there, and
Yeah.
what you learned, what surprised you the most? Anything you would do differently there?
Well, I got connected to a gentleman called Clive Nates, who was the chairman of Lincoln about 6 years ago, South African, the only South African chairman in relatively, multi-million pound European football. My wife is South African, so that already was a very unique thing. And just, he said to me, Raphael, we're in League One now. I think everything has changed. We need to bring in some partners, and we need people who understand they're custodians of the club, understand the club's going to lose money. This is England, and want to be part of something special and building a team that the city can be proud of and that everyone can be proud of. And so in the winter, in the peak of COVID, we brought the Jabra family from San Diego, along with Landon Donovan, who everyone probably remembers is the all-time goal scorer of the U.S. national team, and a very good guy who I've known for a while. He was the kind of president and sporting director of San Diego Loyal, who were in the USL. And we had gone to develop a good relationship. And he said to me they had a good family friend looking for a deal, a unique deal in England. And Clive Nates, who's the chairman of Lincoln, is a massive Everton fan. And Landon had a very short stint at Everton. So we connected them, connected the parties, and it's an amazing story. In the peak of COVID, every Thursday we had 3 to 4 hour calls until Harvey decided to invest. And at one point he was the largest shareholder at Lincoln. And Lincoln's a club that I think everyone can learn something from. They understand what their budget is. They understand, how to form a connection and identity with their fans, and they understand that we're not going to be able to compete with other clubs financially. We're just not. We're not that wealthy. Well, how do you do that? What do you do when you can't compete? And they kind of built our identity and a methodology of, if we're a team, not the best players, but if we're the best team, we could beat anyone. And last year, after many years of working on that, they went 29 games unbeaten in League One, got promoted in first place, most goals, less goals allowed, amazing stories all around the pitch, clubs in the championship for the first time in over 60 years. So Clive Nates took the club from the National League to the championship. And there's been a lot of articles about, everyone's seen the Wrexham story, right? National Championship. Lincoln did it the opposite way. They both were very great for their community. They both did a lot of good things, but Lincoln didn't spend a lot of money. Lincoln built an identity. Lincoln, developed their academy that didn't exist before they came. And Lincoln decided to recruit in areas that no one looked at, like Ireland, and doing all these unique things. And the biggest thing I learned from Lincoln that I always tell all my clients and anyone I work with, you got to treat people well in football. You got to treat people with respect, honor. If you don't, it's going to come back. And not if you don't, forget if you don't. It's just the way you need to do things. And if you do that, good things will happen to you. And whether it's players being convinced to go to Lincoln that never, ever would have come to Lincoln before in the past, some of the top young talent in England, Morgan Rogers, Brennan Johnson, those guys got their first loan at Lincoln, with huge clubs competing, but they understood Lincoln is a place that you want to go, develop, people will treat you well, and there's a clear, strong identity. And no matter what happens, you stick with that identity. And the thing I learned from Clive is you never go too high, you never go too low. It's football. You're going to lose, you're going to win. As a leader and as a person everyone's looking up to, you got to be calm. You got to be calm. And it's a club that to this day I love. I'm a supporter of the club. I love watching the games with my family. So it went from business to personal, and it's just great, really good people there. Amazing CEO, amazing sporting director.
Amazing coach. Obviously, I got Michael Scubara. Like he was also in charge at Leeds for a few games.
Yes, but he left us.
Yes.
So he left us this weekend for Bristol.
Oh,
So we wish him well. He did an amazing job for Lincoln, but it stings a bit. It stings. But yeah, you're right. He was at Leeds. So he was a great coach, got the team together, made everyone believe. And if you would have told someone August 1st, 2025, that Lincoln would finish in first place and go 29 games unbeaten, people would check you into a institution and say that you're crazy. I think Lincoln had a bottom 8 budget. It's unprecedented to do these things in England. And I think I'm just really proud to be connected with them and have worked with them and brought them Americans. And they're a club that I just think a lot of people could learn from.
Great experience, obviously in Lincolnshire by the sound of it, but also we are talking a little bit about Denmark and some of those more European leagues. So amongst those, why Denmark, and which other markets would you look at? When you're looking at opportunities in Europe.
Look, English pyramid, football pyramid is the best in the world. Argue that with anyone any day. I mean, in Germany, the 4 tiers regionalized. In Spain, the 3rd tier is regionalized. In France, it's regionalized. Like, English football pyramid is the best pyramid in the world. But there are financial issues that are being looked at right now by the English regulator. But Denmark has been very interesting to investors because the losses are relatively low. The wages aren't usually massive. It's a market where a lot of players go to develop and then be sold. We've seen an amazing job of excellent recruitment, whether it's the Right to Dream Academy that has their club in Nordisland and Midtjylland, and all these clubs that have figured out, let's recruit properly and then sell at massive profits. A lot of people are surprised to hear that the cities and towns where these clubs are in are 50,000 people towns, very small communities where footballers go there and focus only on the football. Bodo Glimt obviously got a lot of attention this year, being, a Norwegian club that did really well in the Champions League. And again, I think a town of 50,000 people. So Scandinavia is interesting because the spending's not out of control. There's not this, massive amount of battle between wages that you have in England and in other countries. And it's a country where everyone speaks perfect English. It's a very it's a country where everything's very calm. It's
Yes.
the Danish people are they're very good people. They're very welcoming people, and it's a market where if you bring non-EU foreigners, which is what a lot of the owners are doing, and develop them, you can sell for a big amount. And I think it was in the 25 calendar year, the Superliga clubs in Denmark did over 160 million euro in sales. So it's a market now where even if you buy a club in the second tier, which I've had experience with investors, excuse me, you can sell a player for €1 million. You can do anything. It's a market that's it's interesting for the smaller clubs don't have massive fan bases. It's a small country, so you don't have that pressure that you might have in other countries in England, where a club in League Two, if they lose the game, you could have 80 Twitter comments. And so it's more calm there. The lower tiers in these markets aren't like there's passionate fans. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the same as in other markets where it's their life. Because it's also a very small community, so it's a good place to bring players to develop. But more importantly, forgetting even the foreign players, the Danish player is a very, very good domestic player these days. I mean, we've seen Denmark on the international stage in tournaments. There's lots of really, really great Danish players that slip through the cracks at the big clubs. You can pick them up in the second tier and still sell them. So it's a market that has had a lot of good foreign investors, a lot of bad foreign investors, but I really love it. I've had good experience there. We're working with some clubs now. If anyone's listening to this and is interested, feel free to reach out. It's definitely a market that I'm really passionate about. And I think it is a market that as the years go by, I think we'll see more and more foreign investments with the emphasis on North American.
And of course, some of it might be in the context of multi-club ownership, right? I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, do you think, first of all, I guess, what makes a good multi-club? And second, do you think there is a race that multi-club becomes, the only way to go in football?
I'm not a huge fan of MCOs. I think
Mhm.
we have lived in a time where a lot of them have caused a lot of problems to communities. They have ruined clubs. They have ruined fan bases, and it's very hard for me to condone something like that. And so I think it really depends what your goal is as an MCO. If it's just to kind of have a sister club to move players, a lot of people are skeptical of that. We've seen that now around Europe. We've seen the Strasbourg fans in protest against Chelsea taking over, and it's difficult because as a football romantic and historian and someone who loves the history of football, it's hard to see a club with so much history be taken over by a club that then just kind of throws it to the side. Now, there's been some great MCOs. There's some MCOs that add a lot of value and a lot of strategy and money to their clubs. But there's been, unfortunately, also a lot of fraudster ones that I'm not going to get into names, but I'm sure anyone who's listening to this and loves football and is interested in football finance knows what I'm talking about. And it's just that's kind of ruined it. But if a club comes to a club and says, this is really, let's give you 20 bullet points on how we can help you. Not just, oh, we have a lot of money, we're owned by a billionaire, we can just take over. But if there's something that the club feels they're really getting from the partnership besides capital is very important, don't get me wrong. But I think there's some great MCOs out there. I think there's some not so great ones. And I think Denmark is great for an MCO market, but I think clubs are skeptical. That's maybe they're nervous about letting that in, because it's when you're a football club and you're a fan, you don't want to feel like you're second or third choice. Some
Yes.
fans like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
but it's tricky. On the other hand, I think that MCOs will continue to grow. I think more and more investors will get into it. We've worked and spoken to a lot of different MCO groups over the years. I always tell investors, start with one team. Before you
Yeah.
send your PDFs to people and pitching investors about how you want to have 5 clubs and one in Brazil and one in Portugal, why don't you buy one team, run that for 2 years, and see if you then want to buy 5 teams. And a lot of the people I've said that to, in the end, don't end up buying more than one team, because
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
team is already enough. If you're the city group and you have unlimited resources and you can hire the best people from Barcelona, and that's different. But if you're running an MCO as only a way for your investors to make money, I'd like someone to tell me what MCO group has made huge returns for investors. If someone wants to comment or send me an email telling me, I'd love to hear that, because it's very difficult to do that. So I think, again, to summarize, I think MCOs can add a lot of value to other clubs, but it needs to be both clubs are really accepting of it and are happy to have each other on board and feel like it's the right thing for both clubs long term.
I guess, it depends a little bit on what the objectives are and how much,
Yeah.
you're looking at it as building, being an investment vehicle maybe versus supporting a specific community. And there is reason to do either. I guess the other way to, when I look at football investments, is not focusing just on the football side, but also, what else can that brand do? What else can that real estate do? What else, are opportunities that maybe people need to focus on, particularly when you look at, clubs that are not, the top 5, the top 6, or the top 20 in the world, right? They obviously you need to think about, some other ways to web that investment. Let me ask, obviously you have so much experience in with football investments, right? However, there are, I'm sure, still misconceptions, right, that go around. What do you think is the biggest mistake that investors still make looking at football? What's underestimated? What surprises the most, I guess, in the way that investors look at football investments?
I think the biggest thing is successful businessmen think, I built a logistics company from 20 employees to 1,000. How hard can it be to buy a club in Italy, England, etc., and make it successful? I think the understanding of football and cohesion in for American listeners, front office, for Europeans, sporting directors, scouts, how important it is for a club to be united, how important it is to have a vision, a clear strategy of what you're going to do. And most importantly, not to drift from that strategy. If you lose 3 games, don't panic. If you lose 7 games, if you have a clear way of how you want to do things, you need to stick to it. But it's 2026 and there's social media, there's pressure, and unfortunately these things are not as easy as maybe they were in the past, and people get very emotional and people make decisions that maybe aren't the best long term, and then you see a cycle of a coach getting sacked every 3 months. If a coach is getting sacked every 3 months, how do you build a foundation? How do you build a methodology? So I think the biggest misconception, is that investors come in, not just North American, from all over the world to to a new market that they're not from, and just think, well, I was a great businessman, I can do it in football. And as we've seen with a lot of investors, it's very difficult. You have to understand the history of the community and what's happened there and what is important to the fans and what do they appreciate and what do they not appreciate, and how can you understand what they're thinking? And on the other hand, when the fans are all saying on social media, sack the manager, if you don't think it's right to sack the manager, don't sack.
Or suck the board. I've
Yeah.
been on the receiving end of those chants sometimes.
Exactly. And I think we live in a time where you lose a match and it could feel like the world has ended, whether it's Leeds, Man United, Bournemouth, or even the clubs at the bottom this year, Wolves. Like, everything is a disaster. You lose a football match, the world's going to end. You win a football match, it's the best manager in the world. Which is why I'll go back to Lincoln, is that you got to stay calm, you got to stay level-headed, and you have to be clear about your plan. And look, people can be wrong about a plan, but if you go into this summer saying this is what we're going to try and do this year, and you stick to it, I think that, like, a lot of people don't stick to it. That's kind of my point. A lot of people switch and change lanes, and then it's January and you're like, oh my God, we're 2 managers in and the striker that we signed in the summer is already gone. And because of that creates debt. That creates that you have to pay a player off, you have to play a coach off. Keeping things simple, maybe, is it like keeping things simple and remembering maybe how you built your successful businesses, and not to over complicate things. But it's a crazy business. You could have the best intentions in the world. I think some investors come in and they spend enormous amounts of money, and the fans are still really upset at them. How you ruined our club, you ruined our community, and the owner's sitting there in whether it's America or Asia or wherever, going, how can you say these things about me? I've spent 30, 40, 50 million dollars. And it's a different understanding, because in North America, like, if you finish poorly every season in the NBA, there's no ramifications. You just go again, and eventually, maybe in 10 years, you'll win an NBA title. In Europe, you get relegated. It's the difference. And so, yeah, I think the bottom line is just having a clear plan, working with people that you want to work with, whether it's advisors, whether it's sporting advisors, and just sticking to the plan as much as you can. And enjoying the ride, because it's bumpy. If you're gonna own a football club, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's Real Madrid or a club in the 7th tier of Spain, or it's bumpy. You're gonna have amazing evenings where you are not gonna be able to go to sleep because you're so excited, and you're gonna have nights where you're not gonna be able to sleep because the goal missed by a quarter of an inch and now you're out. That's life. This is life. Football is life, and that's also why we love it, and that's why it's the best sport in the world, and nothing will ever come close to it.
Look, Raphael, I love the passion that you exude in your in these conversations, and I think it's been an incredible podcast. So thank you very much for joining me. I do have one last question I want to ask you, which is that
Sure.
if we sit down again, let's say 5 years from now, 10 years, or even 10 years from now, what do you think would have surprised you the most about the evolution of the world of football investing?
Damn, I think that in 5 to 10 years from now, we're going to see more and more private equity go into football. We're already seeing it the last 2 years. I think we're going to see players become more, get more into branding and making money from the side. And I think that the parts of the game that were so great will slowly disappear. I mean, I'm not a VAR fan. I don't like that kind of stuff. I think it kills the game, and having to wait 5 minutes. So I think things like that will get even more. I'm a romantic, and if anyone's been listening to this whole podcast today, I'm a romantic. I've heard some of these things about how now a player might get they're gonna try new things where if a player doesn't throw the ball after 5 seconds, then it's the other teams with 10 men. Like, I just want 90 minutes, old school. And look, you got to modernize for the world. You got to adapt. That's a better word for what's happening in the world. And I get it and I respect it. And I'm not against all the things I've mentioned on this podcast. I think private equity, MCOs, they play a purpose for football. It's just not me. It's not what I believe in, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. I'm not a person who says my way's right and your way's wrong. I just want to do what I think is interesting. But yeah, I think football is just going to get more and more commercial, and we'll have to live with that and see the consequences.
Thank you very much for joining me today. I think it's been an incredible conversation. As I said, really enjoyed all the insights and all the contributions you've given, all the statements you made about also thinking beyond the known in the world of football investing. And I think the fact that ultimately some of the most interesting opportunities can lie very much in things that are perhaps further down the pyramid. So thank you very much, and I look forward to keeping the conversation open. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.